What up YouTube, Big Red here, and I'd just like to welcome you all to my channel. My first time doing a video, so I hope it is entertaining for you as I've had a lot of fun doing it. Right, in this video we have a Blue Pearl Hilux 8X2 I believe the colour code is, and off the top of my head I cannot remember the name of the car. So what have we got right now? We're tack ragging everything down using the air blower. I like to tack rag the surrounding plastic as well because it does hold dirt that gets brought on it from dragging the plastic over the car. Got new panels on this one as well. We have new front guard, new front door. I have prep soled and cleaned all the panels down prior to tack ragging and making this video. Going in all the gaps. Bigger the job, a lot more cleaning is involved, but at the end of the day it makes a difference from a good paint job to a great paint job. Cleaning all the inside of the door edges, blowing it all down. It can be repetitive, but it needs to be done. You'll notice too I get quite anal with things and go over things multiple times. It's just the way I am, and I won't change. It works for me and that's what I do. Alright, I'm about to apply our wet on wet, or sealer as they call it in America. I don't have a gauge on this to determine the air pressure, so I just give it, trigger a pull, listen to the sound, see how it sprays and go for it basically. I spray fairly fast. I've got a lot of fluid pumping out of there, but it's a 1.4mm setup on the SATA 100 BF gun used for mainly wet on wet. I tend to overlap a lot as well, so that's why I move a bit quicker, as not to put too much material build up there. As you can find that it can cause it to take longer to dry, it may skin off and the underneath stays wet, or you just get build up, especially around the edges, which will cause runs and issues further down the track, which we don't want. You don't have to rub the inside of the doors, as the wet on wet adheres to it quite well. That's the factory eco coat, the black. We only really sand the outside just to make sure we've got no imperfections in it, as that will show through in our final product, and that's something we do not want. Being a downdraft booth as well, I like to spray from bottom up. That being said, it's because the overspray, as I'm spraying down, it gets to melt into the wet product down below, whereas if I spray from top to bottom, the overspray coming down can, on a hot day as well, cause dry spray to sit on your panel, and then when you're painting over that, it all stands up instead of sitting down nice and smooth. Being a blue pearl too, they don't cover very well, so I found by making sure that all my panels start the same colour, that's why I put it on the edge of the door, so the edge of the back door to the front door starts the same colour, and if I keep applying all coats evenly and the same, they'll finish the same colour as well. You won't see any colour variation, which can happen on colours that don't cover very well. And there I'm just spraying a bit of blending thinner to help thin out any overspray from the sealer there, just making sure it all just melts in nicely and I don't get a bit of a nasty edge that I've got to try and fill up with colour later on. Once again, I'm just being anal, going over it a second time. There's absolutely no need for it, but yeah, it happened. Rightio, so we've got PPG Envirobase here guys. I reduced my base coat at about 15%, spraying with a SATA 5000 HVLP WSB setup, which I think is roughly a 1.25. Right, we use the fluid tip is wound out at two turns, and we're using about 1.3, 1.4 bar of pressure. We've got the SATA RPS cup on the gun, and I think these are quite good actually, especially when you're going around inside doors and that. if you get into a tight area, you can actually bend the cups, so that way the cup is out of your way. Or if you're painting upside down, you can bend the cup up, allowing the paint to still flow naturally downward, instead of, you know, running out of paint because it's all tilting backwards and not coming out the end of your gun properly. There you go, you can see right there I've just tilted the RPS forward, allowing me to lean the gun backwards but having the natural flow from top to bottom of the paint still. Painting inside the doors can be a bit of a pain in the bum, getting around all the stands, but you just make it work. I try and apply a fairly wet coats inside the door edges, as I don't really put a lot in there. They don't do it from factory. The idea is to try and keep everything, you know, looking as factory as possible. Obviously we can't 100% necessarily do that every time, but we do our best. It's important too, especially around window frames, that you just go over them a couple extra times, because I do find from past experiences that even though you think you've got it, you know, if you check it with what's called a sun gun, or if you have a, you know, a light source, you can still be see-through and transparent, and that's not what you want, especially as this is a driver's door and the driver will open the door and that window frame's right at his eye level or her eye level, and if it's see-through and as they've opened it and the sun's hitting it, they will see that. So it's very important, just check everything, you know, check things twice, save having to repaint. Just tack ragging any overspray off the front of that door. Oh yeah, I hit the edge of that with the tack rag as it's come over the top of the window frame. That's why I've just quickly flicked it back in. Not a big deal, it happens. It's very important too, guys, make sure you hit those edges, because if you're just painting front and back, you know, the paint doesn't tend to go around the edge of the door frame, so you will find that if you do not hit those edges, you will be see-through. Once again, I'm painting fairly close, being a HVLP, it's got a nice open fan, and I'm painting quite fast as I'm putting it on quite heavy, being quite a transparent colour as well. You know, I need to get it on there nice and wet to help the coverage, but I have to be quick because you can put paint on wet without it being heavy. You know, you start getting heavy, it takes longer to dry, plus a lot of build up you don't want, and it can move on you. So the way I do mine, most colours are pretty simple really. I just do like a double coat, which is what you can see me doing now, and then I'll dry it off and I'll do a single coat, because most of the colours are actually quite good for coverage, other than your standard reds and blues and the odd silver. But so you'll find that they'll generally cover in the double coat, and then you put, or I like to put a single coat. It's just to make sure, it's like insurance for me to make sure it's covered. Plus I'll pull back a fraction on the gun and not put it on quite as wet, which also is like a kind of like a semi technique coat. It will just help to iron out any mottling or anything that you've got, plus making sure you're covered before doing the technique coat. Now this colour was actually quite painful in the coverage process. It ended up being 2 double coats and a technical drop coat, I think. From memory, I can't be sure. I don't think there's a single coat in between, but there may very well be. We shall find out. Also too, you see on the very first coat of this guard here, I didn't paint my edges. I've only just started on the second part of the double coat, and that's because 1, I'm saving paint, 2, your edges, you know, as long as they're blue or whichever colour you're painting the car at the end of the day, as long as they match that colour, you don't have to necessarily put loads and loads of paint. Just as long as they've got the colour there, they're not see-through, you're fine. You know, that way you're saving paint, you're saving time, and also too, by putting a lot of paint on your edges, the overspray does wrap around your panel a bit. It can cause cause build up around all your edges as well. You find it more so with clear coating, and it's something you really don't want. It can be a bit of a pain in the ass to try and get rid of those edges, especially if you've got thick build up, and sometimes you end up rubbing through and having to repaint. So yeah. Rightio, we've got the air blower now, and we've done our first double coat on everything. So I've just fast forwarded it, as it does take a little while, and it can be boring watching paint dry sometimes, guys. But the way this water works is it has air drawing across the top of it, you know, blowing across, which in turn draws the water out of the base coat, pulling it out, allowing it to dry. Now you can spray directly at the panel, but what happens is you tend to skin the top of it off and it stays wet underneath. So as you can see there, it's starting to go a matte finish. It's not wet. Once it's matte, it's dry, and then you can tack rag it and proceed to continue painting. And now I didn't include all the footage of drying, it would just make the video too long, but you get the idea. So what we're going to do is just tack rag the blend panel, make sure all the overspray and everything's off of there. Especially with metallic colours and that, you can find sometimes if they've got a coarse sparkle in them, that the overspray lands on the panel and the metallic stands up and it looks really sparkly compared to what's on the vehicle. Now if you don't remove that, that will show through later on, and your paintwork will look, you know, as you're looking across, it will all start looking normal, and then all of a sudden you've got a really big sparkly area. And then once that's happened and you've cleared over that, all you can do is repaint, and once again, that's not cost efficient to you or the boss. So, you know, tack rag it, make sure it's all clean. Not to mention too, any overspray can cause, you know, sand piling. So when you put your coats of clear on it, you'll see it looks like there's lots of hundreds of thousands of bits of little dirt and dust in it, which there's not. It's just the chunkiness of your base coat standing up. So by tack ragging that, you also eliminate it, creating a nice smooth surface to work with each time. I don't always tack rag my full panels, like for example this door is a full panel, there's no blending on it. Sometimes when you tack ragging, you can potentially put dust or lint, you know, from the tack rag or anything on the panel. I mean, have a look over it first. If it looks clean, don't play with it. Sometimes you can do more damage than good. That little bit I've just gone over there on the side of the window frame, it gets covered by a black window moulding sticker type of thing. So you know, some people go, oh, don't even worry about putting a bit of paint there, it gets covered, you don't see it. But for me, peace of mind, if I put the blue there, it doesn't necessarily have to be completely covered, but if you do get like a little chip in the sticker, or for whatever reason it gets pulled up, a bit of it gets pulled up later or something, there is glue under there. It doesn't look like somebody's done a cheapskate job, you know. And it's just, to me, I think it's more professional just knowing that it's covered under there, because if it was my car and I found out later on that, you know, they didn't put it under there, even though it's still sealed and it won't rust or anything, it just, one of those things to me really. But each to their own. You do what the boss wants at the end of the day. So I think overall it only took me just over an hour to complete start to finish of painting this job, which is not bad really for the size of the job, the amount of paint that had to be put on. But yeah, I've obviously shortened it a fair bit. Rightio, you can see me there, I'm just doing a bit of a blend out coat there. Blues and transparent colours are quite easy to blend, as they don't really cover the panel very well, meaning as you're flicking them out, they don't show strong colour difference. Just makes it a lot easier to blend them. So yeah, this is just a single coat before I do my technique coat. It's more just to make sure everything's laying down nice. So it's kind of like a technique coat, but it's also it's a bit of a in between. It's a bit of a technique coat to make sure everything's laying down nice before doing our final technique coat, but it also just makes sure you've got that last little bit of coverage. Hence why I'm just not quite as close to the panel, and I'm just putting it on a little bit lighter. It's just more of an even coat really, not too heavy, not too light, just nice and uniform. It's very important to keep your gun square to the panel as well, you know, making sure that spray pattern's hitting the panel evenly. Just going around all the edges, making sure that I've put blue on them. I've got the 3M sun gun there. Sometimes it helps just pull the sun gun out, you know, get down, bend your knees, have a look, check your edges. If they're see-through, you will see it with the sun gun. By doing this, I can eliminate, you know, leaving that I've missed an edge and leaving it see-through. Rightio, so we're just coming in for the technique coat now. So from 2 turns out, I wind my needle in 3/4 of a turn, so I end up being 1 1/4 turns out on the fluid tip. Fan's fully open, and I drop my pressure down to about 1 to 1.1 bar. Pulling the gun back a little bit as well. The idea of this, you know, is not to put it on heavy at all. I want the paint hits the panel, it looks wet, it hits the panel, but it instantly dries. It's a little bit hard to see from the video there, but trust me, that's what it's doing. And the idea of this is just to make sure all your pearls and your metallics and everything all laid down nice and evenly and uniform. Doing this too can, you know, potentially make sure you've got no model as well. Model's not really a big issue in a colour like this, I believe. It's more your coarse silvers and things like that, mainly that you see your model in, but just keep it all pretty standard across the board. I have a general thing I do it with every colour, whether it needs it or not. That way I know it works, it's done once and it's done right. Consistency is the key. If you do every job the same, you do every process the same, and you know it works, you shouldn't have an issue. Also, by doing that as well, if you do change something in your technique and you come to a problem, all you got to do is look back and say, well, what are the steps I did? What did I do that I do differently? And then when you figure out what it is you did different to what you normally do, there's a good chance that's the reason why your paint job hasn't come out how it should have. So that's why they're just basic steps that I follow every time I paint a car, and it's kind of, it just guarantees the job for me. So I didn't include the footage of obviously drying most of that paintwork out and tack ragging, but I can assure you I tack ragged the whole lot before applying the clear. So we've got the Jet 5000 RP 1.2 set up on this one. I'm spraying at about 2.2 bar for this, and I have 2 turns out on the fluid. Now I like to spray fairly close, fairly quick. Fluid's pumping out, pressure's nice and high, and clear's going on quite nice. The first coat's always a little bit dry. It's not a big deal. I mean, look at the gloss. The gloss looks great, but you don't want to overload your first coat. You'll just want to seal it all off, have a nice even start for the second coat. The second coat will evidently, you know, finish it all off for you, make sure it's all nice and smooth. But these aren't show cars. You've got to remember they come out from factory with a lot of peel. You know, some are quite dry as well. Toyotas are quite peely. They're fairly dry. Mazdas are another one. They're quite dry and peely as well. I mean, they look wet, but when you actually get down and look, you know, on the angle and look down the side of the car, they look like the skin of an orange. That's why, you know, in the trade we call it an orange peel. Sealing off the inside of the door. The inside of the door gets one nice wet coat inside. I don't do two, mainly because one, it doesn't really see much sun. I'm using LVC 104 Enviroflo ultra high solid clear from PPG. It's their Enviro range. Lovely clear, goes on nice, holds a good gloss. It flows out really well as well. It's if you get a bit of a run, it can be quite unforgiving, so you really don't want to get a run in it if you can help it. Like any clear really, but this one, just trying to buff the run out's just 10 times harder in my opinion. Keeping the gun square to the panel. Once again, everything's consistent, nice and even. Just make yourself like a robot. You're probably looking at that going, geez, you've gone over that a few times, but like I said with my colour, because I'm painting quite fast, there's not a lot of product getting built up on the panel itself. So, and I do like to overlap a fair bit, probably about 60-65%. I just find it makes everything nice and even. You know, some people go, you know, you only need to go 50% or 40%, you know, but hey, each to their own. If it works for you, great. Do what, you know, you just do what works for you. Right, we're coming up for the second coat now. On the second coat, I will go just that a little bit slower. I didn't down here, but that's alright. I've worked out that I was a little bit too fast. Later on in the clip, you'll see I've gone back and just put a bit of extra clear on there because it was a little bit too dry for my liking. As you can see now, I've just slowed down a little bit. Got in there nice and close. See too, having the first coat on nice and even, not too heavy, it's kind of acted a bit like Velcro for the second coat. Gives it something to hold on to. Make sure it doesn't move. And I've noticed more so with this clear than like standard, you know, medium solid clears as well, that your first coat on this clear is going to determine your final product, right? So if the first coat's very dry, it doesn't matter how hard you bash your second coat on, it's not going to flow out very well. It's still going to look quite horrible and dry. Whereas on an MS clear, more so, bashing your second coat on it tends to melt into itself a little better. I mean, don't get me wrong, this melts into itself nicely, but it will form around the peel you put on the first coat. Whereas an MS will kind of build up on itself and flow out a bit more. So and make sure too, guys, with the top of those door frames, you know, have a look at them, stand on the angle, get the light, use the light, and make sure you're not dry, because even though they're not a big area and your fan covers it all, my personal experience, you can look over the top of a door frame or the roof rail or something like that, and it can be quite dry. I don't know why it happens. Maybe it's just my technique, but just double check to make sure you're actually nice and smooth there. Got plenty of product on there, it's not dry. Must say I do love the 5000 1.2 setup for clear. It's taken me a while to dial it in, to be honest. It's a bit of a tricky one, but it lays this clear out nice once you've worked out, you know. Plus two, different people paint differently, so it's what works for me. It looks good, I've got it dialed in, and I'm a fairly consistent painter at work. It's not very often that I have a bit of a mistake or a bit of a run or anything. As you can see there, the gloss is beautiful, nice and shiny, and this is what I was talking about earlier. I just thought it was a little bit dry in that spot. Give it a quick flick in. Not too much, you don't want to get too much build up on that panel, but just enough to melt it in nicely and look good. So that's it, guys, that's the overall product, all nice and finished. Unfortunately I haven't got any footage at the moment to show you of it put back together, but yeah, that's it. Hope you enjoyed the video. If so, let me know. Like it, subscribe, tell your friends, and we'll hope to see you on the next one, guys. Thank you.